This is Hardy's famous, made in England, perfect fly reel. And so is this. And so is this. And today, I'm going to review them all. If you've been following along with the Hardy Heritage Reel Collection, you're probably already aware that they now make 3 different versions of the Hardy Perfect. So we've got the older Widespool Perfect, then we've got the 1921 Widespool Perfect, and just to make things extra confusing, we've got the 1912 Perfect. Now, you're probably confused, and frankly, so am I. So today, I'm going to dive into the differences, and I'm going to warn you ahead of time, the differences are quite subtle between these reels. And hopefully, if you're in the market for one of these perfects, you'll now be able to decide which is the right one for you. But because we've already reviewed the Widespool Perfect, and frankly, because the Perfect has been around for over 100 years, we're not going to do a full review. This is really going to be more about the differences and details between these 3 reels, rather than the performance of what is, let's face it, a classic standard arbor reel. Because that performance really is going to be the same between all 3 and really between most of the Hardy Classic series. Before we continue, I wanted to let you know about Trident Travel, our new destination travel service where you'll get our expert planning and guidance at no additional cost. That means no credit card fees, no booking fees, and for a limited time, you'll even earn Trident rewards on your travel bookings. So for every trip you book, you'll be earning valuable points that you can use towards free tackle here at Trident. Recently, we've had some clients go on some absolutely fantastic trips like bone fishing in Belize, permit fishing in Mexico, and trout fishing in Iceland. So if you're thinking about taking a fly fishing trip, Trident Travel is the way to do it. We've got a ton of great destinations, excellent service, and even more destinations being added every month. Check us out at tridentflyfishing.com/travel. So let's dive in by starting with the Widespool Perfect. In the Widespool Perfect, is a fantastic reel. Hardy brought this reel out as a way to lower the price point of the Perfect. They kept the vast majority of the really key features of this reel. You're still getting that awesome sound, and that iconic look and feel. But the Perfects that were out sort of 10 or 15 years ago were starting to get really expensive, and Hardy wanted to bring that price point down a bit while still keeping it as a made in England reel. So they got rid of the agate stripper. They presumably, in theory, at least widened the spool a little bit. And lo and behold, we've got the Hardy Widespool Perfect. Versus those older reels, this is definitely a more utilitarian reel. This is going to be a reel that you're not afraid to take out and actually use. But as you'll see, clearly Hardy's realized that there's some demand for more dressed up versions of this reel. And that's, I think, where the 1921 Widespool comes in. And right away, you're going to notice that these 2 reels are fairly similar. Frankly, if you took a quick glance at the top, you might not even know that they were different at all. But in keeping with that 1921 tradition, they've used 2 different anodizes here. So you've got that gunmetal from the Widespool Perfect, and they've combined that with a silver color. So it's really a 2-toned perfect reel. And that gunmetal color isn't quite the same as that Widespool Perfect, but it's pretty close. They've added back the line guard here, although it's not in agate. It's still a more utilitarian version of that line guard. They've also gone back to a black handle here, as opposed to that ivory handle on the Widespool. And the other noticeable change is the reel foot, which here has a brass look to it. Hopefully it's actually brass as well. But again, this reel looks and feels very similar to the Widespool Perfect. And, well, let's see how it sounds. To me, this reel here sounds a bit deeper, although in fairness, it could be entirely due to the fact that this is a different sized reel. And that actually brings up an interesting point. The 1921 version of the Widespool comes in different sizes than the original Widespool and a lot more sizes than the 1912 version. The click adjustment knob here is also a little bit more brassy. But that's really all the difference is. They're mostly cosmetic except for this line guard, and you're still getting that same classic hardy look and feel, but in sort of an updated, nicer looking, nicer feeling package. And I think the 1921 is just a more interesting reel than the original Widespool. But now Hardy's decided to make things even more confusing. They've done that by releasing the 1912 Perfect. That's right, not 1913, not 1914, not 1911, 1912, just so it can be more easily confused with 1921. But this is definitely the pinnacle of the Perfect lineup. They've brought back the agate line guard. We've got a much fancier click adjuster here. They've brought back the Royal Warrant. And frankly, this is just a more interesting reel than these other two. Now, of course, this is not a two-tone reel, and it is missing the brass reel foot, which I think is a really nice touch on the 1921 version. The other thing that I think is interesting is that this reel here only comes in two sizes at the moment. So this is solidly a trout reel, whereas the other two are available in at least a 4-inch model, and you can use that for your spey, steelhead, Atlantic salmon fishing that I think a lot of people appreciate and really love to use those perfects for. But the 1912 version is really going to be a classic bamboo and fiberglass, or just a classic reel enthusiast's reel for now. I'll note also that the finish is slightly different between the 1912, which is more of a gunmetal, to the gunmetal color on the 21, to the Widespool. So they're all sort of in the same color family, but they are slightly different. And that could be due to variations in anodizing, or it could be entirely intentional, something that they're trying to match a retro reel. And last is going to be the sound, and the sound on this 1912, well, it still sounds like a Perfect, and it's pretty good. Take a listen. Again, I'm not going to be able to really comment on the differences in sound because they are different sized reels that are going to sound different due to the hollow bodies inside. But I will say this one, to my ear, does sound a little bit better, a little bit crisper than the other two. Maybe it's the agate. Who knows? Now, there are some other differences as well. This 1912 version is not denoted as a Widespool. But that said, it's got the very same capacity as the original Widespool. So for a reel that has the same diameter, the only thing that can really change is the width, because it does have a standard arbor as well. And that means that probably there's not a lot of difference in width. And frankly, this one here is a size up, and it's only a little tiny bit wider, and I'd say definitely within the margin of error for a reel that is a size up. Similarly, this reel weighs about the same as the older Widespool. Again, I'm just taking Hardy's word for it because we didn't have the same sizes available to weigh today, but I do believe them. Interestingly though, the 1921 Widespool weighs a bit more than the standard Widespool. And that's kind of what you'd expect because of that line guard. But somehow they've managed to cut out a little bit of weight on the newer 1912 version. But all of this is not really that big of a deal, because if you're fishing one of these Hardy Perfects, weight is really not going to be a concern. And if we're playing with an ounce or two here and there, it's really not a big deal, because you're not buying these reels for their performance characteristics and their balance. You're buying them because they sound great and they look like a classic Hardy, and they all do. So let's talk pricing. The original Widespool starts out at $6.95. The new 1921 wide spool starts out at $7.95. And as you probably guessed, the newest 1912 non-wide spool Perfect starts out at $8.95. And frankly, if you're a collector, you're probably going to buy all three. But I think for a few hundred extra dollars, if you're looking for that absolute premium Hardy Perfect experience, this is the one that does it, as long as you're not a salmon fisherman. Tell us what you think about these new Hardy Perfects. Are you confused? Are you going to buy them all? What year of Hardy Perfect is your favorite? Leave us a comment, let us know. And of course, if you want to see more classic fly reel reviews, don't forget to like and subscribe, as that's the way that we're going to know that we should make more content just like this. And of course, if you've got questions about these Hardy Perfects or any reel in the Hardy lineup, give us a call at 888-413-5211 or email us 24/7 at support@tridentflyfishing.com. I'm Ben. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.